Welcome to your first session for the year. Good morning, Marius.
Hi, Michelle.
Good morning. How are you?
Can you?
Excellent. Compliments of the season to you, even though it's already beginning of February.
Yes, and to you. Hope it's a great one, huh?
Absolutely. And once again, from behalf of Leapfrog, thank you so much for always doing these sessions for us. I think you've got a much bigger crowd this year, but it's good from all over the country. Marius, we always look forward to you sharing your insights with us. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand it over to you this morning.
Cool. Thank you very much. Okay, so guys, the topic for today is going to be, 1 second. Sorry, I said an echo. Okay, guys, the topic for today is going to be subject to sales and continued marketing. And the idea about with the webinar today is really to give you guys a rough idea as what my thoughts are on around subject to sales and continued marketing. So it happens all the time, guys. We have a buyer who wants to buy a property and they need to sell their property. So it's an absolute reality in the industry within which we work. It's not desirable. Obviously, we'd prefer to sell a property directly to a buyer who can pay cash or get a bond, but sometimes they need to sell the other property. And in my experience, it's one of the most confusing parts of real estate. Especially to people who don't really have the experience. So of course, a subject to sale is a scenario where you find a buyer, and that buyer either he owns an existing property, he doesn't want to own a second property. Alternatively, he owns a second property, but he needs to sell it simply because in order to get new finance, the bank's not going to allow him to have two bonds to pay. It's not affordable for him. So it's just a reality of where we are. So in my mind, guys, there's 3 types of subject to sale clauses. There's 3 scenarios. All right. So the first one is the one where I have the clause in front of you, and essentially what we're talking about here is that the buyer needs to sell their the buyer needs to sell their property to buy the property that you are marketing, and they haven't yet started marketing, or they haven't sold their property yet at all. All right. So in this case, we're going to say the agreement is subject to the suspensive condition that the purchaser accepts an offer to purchase for the sale of his property situated at, for an amount of, and we'll put the amount, or such lesser amount as may be accepted by the purchaser, and that all suspensive conditions therein are fulfilled by no later than. So we're saying to this buyer, listen, you have a property at this address. We're going to give you X amount of time to sell that property on an unsuspensive basis. And we have a purchase price which you must accept, or such lesser amount. The reason why we have or such lesser amount is because, say, for example, we say he's going to sell his property for 2 million rand, but the buyer now decides, well, he's actually going to compromise and sell it for 1.9. So then that 1.9 will still fulfill our suspensive condition, which then makes our agreement binding, which is what we want. Guys, the reason why I have drawn this clause this way to say, so for example, we'll say he must he must sell his property and fulfill all suspensive conditions, for example, by the 1st of July, as an example. The way I've drawn it is such that he must sell his property and fulfill all suspensive conditions in order to fulfill our suspensive conditions. So in other words, our buyer must sell his property and his buyer must get a bond so that his transaction is unsuspensive, and then we can move ahead. There's a lot of debate, guys, and different people draft these clauses in different ways. And some of the clauses simply say, this agreement is subject to sale of the buyer's property for amount of 2 million rand or such less amount as he may accept by no later than the 1st of July. But they don't actually stipulate that the suspensive conditions in the subject to sale must also be fulfilled. And there's actually case law around what is the definition of sale. When is a property sold? Is it when you sign the agreement, or is it when you fulfill the suspensive conditions? In the clause that I've got in front of you here, we exclude that debate and that argument, and we simply say, well, the condition is fulfilled on the day that the buyer, the purchaser, the buyer's buyer gets his bond. The second type of clause, all right, is where when you meet the buyer and when the buyer puts the offer to purchase in to buy the property that you're marketing, he has already sold his property. He's already sold his property, but that sale is still subject to, for example, his buyer getting a bond. So then we say the purchaser warrants that his property, being X, has been sold, and this agreement is subject to the suspensive condition that the suspensive conditions in the agreement to sell pertaining to the sale of the buyer's property are fulfilled no later than. All right. So in other words, what we need to do is we need to then get a copy of your buyer's agreement that he's now sold his property, and determine when is the bond due date. And that's the date we must write in here, and we must of course give that a little bit of leeway to count for extensions and that kind of stuff. Type number 3, all right, is not really a suspensive condition. It's more of a recordal. And what we record here is that the purchaser warrants that his property, being X, has been sold, and that all suspensive conditions have been fulfilled, all right? And he warrants that the purchase price and the terms of the sale are sufficient to enable the fulfillment of the terms and conditions in this agreement, including not limited to guarantees, occupation, data transfer, and costs, etc. So in other words, in type number 3, we have the scenario where the buyer has already sold his property and all suspensive conditions have been fulfilled, and we're simply going to record that the proceeds of the sale of this property is going to be used to fund the property that you're selling, that you're marketing for your seller. So those are the 3 kinds of subject to sell clauses, and I do think it's important that one understand the difference and identify them when for when the time comes. Okay, so let's just talk about some general principles. So, and again, guys, please understand that in different agencies across different provinces, and there's different approaches to subject to sell clauses. And I can promise you now, if some people get pretty emotional about it, they have a very fixed opinion that it must be like this or it must be like this. To my mind, there isn't really right or wrong answers. There's just differences in approaches. So there are a few other pretty standard clauses that you find going along with these subject to sell clauses. And the first one will say, in the event of the suspension condition relating to the sale of the buyer's property not being fulfilled, the agreement will lapse and the deposit plus interest will be refunded to the purchaser. It's the same as a bond condition. If the bond is not granted, the buyer wants to know that the agreement's going to lapse. Okay, it doesn't get cancelled, it lapses, and the deposit and interest will be refunded. Then, of course, the next clause we say, in the event of the performance of the condition, we agree to instruct the same conveyancer or the conveyancers to effect simultaneous transfer of the property insofar as possible, because we have sale number 1 and sale number 2, and we need to try and match those 2 sales up in terms of timing. We need to register them together in the deeds office, right? Or at the very least, the subject to sale must be registered first, and then we need the funds to finance the property sale number 1. So to the extent possible, we want to register these transactions in the deeds office simultaneously, because that takes care of our occupation date issues. And these are things that I think we need to be aware of, and try and not leave people hanging or without a property for a month. So it always requires careful examination of your existing sale, your subject to sale, and make sure that they tie up nicely together. And then, of course, you have a standard clause that says, the condition, the suspensive conditions for the benefit of the buyer, and it can be waived at any time in writing. So, for example, the buyer may not actually need to sell his property. The buyer may be financially strong enough to buy the property that you're marketing without selling his property, but he would like to sell his property because he doesn't really want to own 2 properties. So he creates the condition, but when he sees that there's a competing offer, what he does is he waives the condition, and he's entitled. He waives the condition. And now, essentially, he's going to now finance the property, not through the sale of his property, but through other means like cash or maybe even a bond. Okay, and then of course we want to recall that the proceeds of the sale of the buyer's property will be used to purchase the property purchase in terms of this agreement. So those are just the sort of standard clauses that sort of add body and help the whole scenario make sense. Okay, so just as an aside, okay, and I just want to talk quickly about subject to sale bonds. So let's just park the idea of subject to sales for a moment, all right, and just understand this. So this is like I'm digressing slightly, but it is kind of within context. If you sell a property, all right, you as an agent, you're the effective cause. You sell a property that's a buyer from a seller to a buyer. When the buyer's bond is granted, what I'm saying to everyone is, don't celebrate just yet. Take that bond grant and study it and examine it, all right? And this is regardless of whether or not your agreement is subject to the sale of another property. If it's just a normal property sale, or if it's subject to, you get that bond grant and examine it. Because what you want to do is you want to ascertain whether or not the bank has inserted any special conditions. For example, they make the agreement that the bond grant subject to the sale and cancellation of all existing bonds over the buyer's existing property. Now, if you get a bond grant like this, if your agreement of sale is subject to the sale of the buyer's property, well, then that bond grant fulfills the suspensive condition, because the scenario contemplated in the special condition is already contemplated in your sale agreement. But if your agreement is not subject to the sale of another property, all right, then that bond grant, which is subject to the sale of the buyer's property, does not fulfill the suspensive condition, and you now need to go to your buyer and say, well, you've got a bond, but it's subject to the sale and cancellation of your existing bond. Have you sold the property? Are you marketing the property? And you must enter into an addendum whereby your seller accepts this is now effectively a subject to sale property. So what I'm saying is, just as a cautionary note, please always read those conditions. Ascertain whether or not there is a condition that needs to be taken care of, and then of course action that accordingly. Okay, right. Let's talk about continued marketing. Inherent in a subject to sale, subject to the sale of a buyer's property, is a continued marketing clause. But let's just talk about this continued marketing clause as a general proposition, right? So it's possible that the normal place you find a continued marketing clause, all right, is where you have a subject to this agreement which is subject to the sale of the buyer's property. So the buyer now, for example, has 90 days to sell his property. And guys, sorry, just while I'm on this point, give your buyer long enough to sell his property, So when you complete the clause, don't give the guy 30 days to sell his property. Give him 90 days to sell his property. You have a deal in hand. You have the continued marketing clause. You may as well give him a nice long period of time. Maybe not too long, because you want to keep the guy under a little bit of pressure, but have a reasonable period of time, within which to allow the guy to market his property. So that's a normal place you would find a continued marketing period, because within that 90-day time period, your seller can continue to market the property. All right, your seller can continue, and if he finds a better offer, he presents it as a competing offer, which we're going to talk about now. But remember, guys, that we sometimes have a general continued marketing clause. Now, I find amongst the different agencies, some agents like to have a general continued marketing clause, and some agencies don't like to have it. If you have a general continued marketing clause, what the clause will say is, pending the fulfillment of any suspensive conditions in this agreement, the seller shall have the right to continue to market the property. So in other words, if your agreement is subject to a mortgage bond, your seller can continue to market the property pending the granting of that mortgage bond. As I say, sometimes it's standard in the agreement and sometimes it's not. With subject to sales, it's got to be a standard clause that goes with your addendum or your annexure that deals with the subject to. And essentially what the subject to clause says is, where the seller obtains a competing offer, which is unconditional, the competing offer is presented to the first buyer, who then has 48 hours within which to either waive his condition, fulfill his condition. But let's talk about that in a moment. So I'm just jumping between my slides here. So remember, and I'm going to show an example of this clause coming up, but also remember that, guys, and this is important for you to know, because you deal with various offers to purchase, because you for example, maybe the agent who is studying the property with a subject to clause in it, where your buyer must sell their property, or you could be the agent who's bringing the competing offer. And if you, the agent, bring the competing offer, it's important for you to read the first offer to purchase and ascertain the terms of the continued marketing clause. And what I've seen is sometimes the clause says the seller is entitled to market the pending fulfillment of the suspensive conditions herein. The seller may continue to market the property. If the seller finds a bona fide competing offer, which he finds more favorable, all right, he then must give the buyer 48 hours, and this is where the differences come in. Sometimes it says within which to waive or fulfill all suspensive conditions in this agreement. Alternatively, it might say to waive or fulfill and match or better the terms of the competing offer. So in other words, it's not just a case of waiving conditions, waive the subject to sale. It's also a case of you must match or better the offer to purchase. And I find that that different agencies have different approaches. And as I've said, I've found people to be quite emotional about it. Some people say it's totally unfair. Some people say it's not fair to the buyer, to the seller. I think that you have to pick an approach, and you kind of just have to go with it and work with whatever your offer to purchase says. Some continued marketing clauses, like for example the Chas Everett offer to purchase, it goes even further, all right, to say that if the competing offer if you have a competing offer, not only must you waive the conditions, all right, but you must put the cash up within a certain amount of time, within a certain time period. So I don't know if you've ever seen the Chas Everett offer to purchase, but that's what it says. I think that's quite onerous, but it's obviously designed to avoid the primary offer being hit out of the park by means of a competing offer. But as I say, I think the important thing is read these conditions and just understand exactly what your clause says and what your competitor's clause says, so that you don't make any mistakes. Okay, so as I said earlier, the form of the clause varies from agency to agency. I'm going to read to you what this clause says, and then we'll have a brief discussion around it. So it says pending fulfillment or waiver of the suspension condition related to the sale of the buyer's property, as more fully set out above, the seller shall be entitled to continue to market the property and accept any other bona fide offer, guys. And that's an important point. Let me just stop there. It must be a genuine offer. There must be an actual buyer, right? A bona fide offer, and we don't say it, but it's any bona fide offer. It can be for a lower purchase price, all right? It doesn't have to be at the same or higher purchase price. It's just a more acceptable offer to the seller, all right? So it said any other bona fide offer, provided he shall first given the purchase of 48 hours, and that 48 hours, it's not written in stone. Sometimes it's 72 hours, sometimes it's 3 working days, sometimes it's 7 working days. There are variations within which to waive or fulfill all suspensive conditions in this agreement. So, guys, we have to waive or fulfill all suspensives, not only the subject to sale, but all suspensive. So this agreement is also subject to a bond that must also be fulfilled. Okay, such notice period to be calculated from the time the written notice, together with a copy of the alternative offer. It's important. A copy. When you give notice, you've got to give a notice with a copy of the competing offer. And of course, people say, well, what about POPI? No problem. You cross out all the personal details of the buyer, so there's no breach of privacy, all right? So to be calculated from the time the written notice together with a copy offer to that effect have been delivered to the purchaser by hand, at which time is deemed to receive by him. So again, there are variations to this. Many agreements of sale and most agreements of sale nowadays will say you can deliver by hand, or via email, all right, by hand or via email, okay? I'll talk more about the delivery in a moment. So then the next clause says the seller may not give notice as contemplated in the preceding clause until all suspensive conditions in the alternative offer have been fulfilled or waived. Okay, and sometimes there isn't a full sentence to say that. It simply says that the seller can continue to market the property and accept any bona fide unconditional offer. All right, and again, guys, there's a variation here. Some agencies will only allow the competing offer to be presented as a competing offer if it is either a cash deal or if it's a bond deal that the bond has been granted. Okay. Some other agencies that we deal with, they don't want that clause. They don't want that clause. They want to be able to move fast. So if they're marketing a property subject to, they get a competing offer. They want to go. They want to go and present the competing offer without worrying about whether or not the competing offer is unsuspensive or not. Okay, it's a very important distinction between the different agreements. Then, of course, if the buyer fails to waive or fulfill the suspension condition on the lapsing of the 48-hour period, the seller is entitled to accept or proceed with the competing offer. Okay, and again, guys, it depends on the format and content of the agreement. It's either going to be that you waive or fulfill, or waive and fulfill and match or better. Okay, so that we find those variations. So I think that what we've spoken about on this clause we've essentially discussed. So yeah, I've basically discussed what's on this clause, and that's just talking about the competing offer being an unconditional offer. And as I said earlier, guys, this is not written in stone. Different agreements have different ways of approaching it. Some want the competing offer to be unconditional, and some say, well, the competing offer can't, doesn't need to be conditional. On cash offers, the whole idea with having the offer to purchase conditional or not conditional, right? If you're the agent who sold the property, okay, you're the agent who sold the property, it's subject to the sale of the buyer's property. One of the points I'm going to speak about a little bit later in a few minutes, and I may as well just deal with it now, is that when you take a subject to offer, you've got to indulge in what I call mandate management. All right. So what you want to do is, if you have a subject to sale offer that you've taken, you want to make sure that you have the sole mandate on the seller's property. Okay. You want to make sure, if you don't have a sole mandate, what you want to do is get a sole mandate signed. Because if you don't have a sole mandate, now you have your subject to sale, your buyer's got 90 days to sell their property, but now you're going to have other agencies bring their buyers to the property. And when their buyers bring a more favorable or a more acceptable bona fide offer, their offer is going to be presented as an offer, as a competing offer to your offer. And if the competing offer is proceeded with, your agreement falls away and becomes null and void, and you now have nothing. And that's why what many agencies do is they say, hold on, the competing offer must be unconditional. Because what we don't want to happen, all right, and this is also from the seller's point of view, I don't want to have a subject to sale. We have a competing offer. The competing offer is presented as a competing offer. The seller, the buyer, our buyer number one can't waive or fulfill the condition. Therefore, our offer falls away. The second offer becomes the offer that's the governing offer. But then on the second offer, that buyer doesn't get a bond. Now that offer also falls away. Now the seller is left with nothing. The seller had an offer, competing offer, they've both fallen away because you didn't fulfill the suspension conditions. So the safe approach is to make the subject to marketing that the competing offer must be unconditional. Because now we know when that unconditional offer comes in, we know that offer is going to proceed. All right. And it also protects you as the agent, that you can't be knocked out easily with an unconditional offer. And it protects the seller, because the seller is always going to have one or the other offer working for him. And this is when this last point, this last slide, when you talk about cash competing offers, I see some agents who are taking a very, very cautious approach that when there's a competing offer and it's a cash offer, they make that buyer in the cash offer put his money down first before the offer is presented as a competing offer, because we want to know that the buyer's actually got the money before we let go of sale number one. So in terms of mandate management, you want to go to your seller and you want to make sure that your seller has that you've got a mandate with your seller. So you're not competing with all the other agents in the area. And you want to go to your buyer and you want to say to your buyer, Mr. Buyer, you need to sell your property. Please give me a mandate. And now maybe you can control both sides of the process, or your company can control both sides of the process. Guys, my next slide is about delivery of the competing offer. Guys, and I dealt with this already, preferably by hand. Why by hand? Because it gives you the chance to have a discussion with buyer number one, right? You want to have a discussion. Registered mail post is never going to work, but you can certainly do it via email. But whatever you do, and you'll see, I'll talk about communication in a moment. Whatever you do, guys, your communication is key. You must be discussing these issues with your clients, because remember, your buyer number one. So you've got buyer number one, subject to, we find the competing offer, we present the competing offer, buyer number one can't match the terms or we can't waive the condition. So buyer number one falls away, we go with buyer number two. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to take buyer number two and pivot buyer number two into a different property that you're selling. But if you're not communicating very, very clearly, this can become a problem. You know, I find that it's such an emotional issue. It's such an emotional issue, this issue of subject to sales. I mean, consider this, guys. Consider this. Buyer number one comes and buys your property. He has his whole family and his parents and his children. They picked out their bedrooms. They are emotionally invested in the property, but they must sell their property. So we give them 90 days to sell their property. There's a competing offer comes in. They can't waive the conditions, so they lose the agreement. And we proceed with buyer number two. They are now upset. They're upset. And you know how people play this blame game very easily? They're upset. They want someone to blame. But if you communicate with everybody very clearly to explain what the scenario is, to explain how subject to sales work, how the time periods work, how the competing offers work, and when you get a competing offer, notify them immediately. So then what you can do is, if you communicate, you can avoid the disappointment that comes with the buyer number one losing losing this property. Guys, there's also the issue of the threat of litigation. So you have to be so careful in A, drafting the clauses, B, in marketing the second property, C, in drafting the 48 hours notice, and D, in delivering that notice. Because remember, if you get this wrong, there could be litigation. You got one offer, subject to the sale of the buyer's property. You get a competing offer. You give notice to buyer number one. Buyer number one can't waive or fulfill. Therefore, you go with buyer number two. But if buyer number one really wants the property and they go to their attorney, we've seen this happen. They go to their attorney and they say, no, hold on. You can't cancel. You didn't comply with your own agreement. You didn't give notice properly. Therefore, our agreement is valid and we've now fulfilled our condition. We now are going to go ahead. So that's why these things are not only emotional and tricky. They've just got this underlying threat of things going wrong. What I always say to the agents that I work with is, please let us work with you. Let's work together as a team. I mean, that's what our function is, right? Let's work as a team. That when you have a subject to sale, that we can give notice properly with the right communication, with the right wording, to make sure it's actually done properly and that it's successful. And the communication is largely up to you. The last point that I want to make, guys, in the last 60 seconds that I've got of talking, is I sometimes find that what we do is we have a standard, sometimes the agreement, the clause is a standard agreement, the subject to sale clause. It's a standard clause in your offer to purchase. But sometimes it's by way of an annexure. And there's nothing wrong with either of those approaches. But what I have seen in the past is those agents who have an annexure, what they do is they now arrive on a Sunday after their show day, and they sit down with a buyer and they write out the offer to purchase, but they realize that the buyer needs to sell their property. So what they then do is they don't have the actual wording of the clause. So they write the wording out of their head and they say, this agreement is subject to sale of the buyer's property situated at by this date. But they don't have the continued marketing clause. They don't have all those little clauses that make this work, right? And that's the most dangerous thing you can do. So I'm saying if you don't have the wording available, please don't try and write it out of your head. Get a hold of your conveyancer, have it sent to you. We'll WhatsApp it to you as an example, but make sure that you get the right wording, because you must understand that these clauses are very, very carefully thought out. Every sentence, every word is deliberately set out to achieve a specific goal, right? I had a client once, just to give you my very last example before I stop. I had a client once who sold the property for 1.2 million rand, subject to the sale of the buyer's property. But he simply wrote in a clause that says, this agreement is subject to the sale of buyer's property within 90 days. Then, in the 90-day time period, he got a competing offer for 1.5 million rand. He said to me, what do? I said, keep quiet, or take it as a backup offer, because he didn't have the right clause. He didn't have the continued marketing clauses. He wasn't able to use that offer and present it to buyer number one as a competing offer because the clauses weren't there and he simply wasn't allowed to do it. So what I'm saying to you guys is, if you don't have the right clauses, get the right clauses. Don't take chances on trying to write it out of your head, because it's not that easy. Okay, guys, that's exactly 10 o'clock, and I'm done. I hope that was. I hope it wasn't too quick. And I hope that you guys found something valuable and something useful in that. You're of course always welcome to contact me, and we can discuss and debate these issues. But I hope that was of some use.
Thank you so much, Marius. Always insightful as ever, and wishing you a great month going forward.
Yeah, good. Have a good rest of the session, guys, and I'll say goodbye. Thanks all.
Cheers, Marius. Bye.